It was Monday morning at Ridgewood Middle School, the kind of school where the hallways gleamed and everything seemed to run on routine. Teachers liked order, structure, predictability, and Miss Cartwright, a stern white woman in her late 40s, prided herself on keeping her seventh grade English class under tight control. The bell rang. Students poured in, chatting and settling into their seats. Miss Cartwright stood at the front with her attendance clipboard, glasses perched at the end of her nose. Then in walked Jordan Green, 12 years old, quiet, wore his hoodie half zipped and his backpack slung low. A black kid with big, observant eyes and a notebook always tucked under his arm. He nodded politely and headed for his seat in the back, same as every day. But this morning, Miss Cartwright narrowed her eyes the moment he crossed the threshold. "You're late," she said sharply, glancing at the clock. Jordan paused. "No, ma'am." Bell just rang. She didn't check. She didn't ask. Her voice rose a little louder, just enough for others to hear. "That's not the point. You've been pushing it all week." Jordan stood still for a moment, unsure whether to defend himself. His hands clenched the strap of his backpack. "Leave your attitude at the door or don't come in at all," Miss Cartwright snapped. "You can sit this period out." In the hallway, a few heads turned. A few kids smirked. Jordan didn't argue. He just nodded silently, stepped back out of the classroom, and sat on the floor in the hallway, alone. No one asked why. No one questioned her. To them, it was just another disruptive kid being handled. But no one noticed the notebook Jordan held, full of essays, stories, and vocabulary exercises, written far above his grade level. No one knew he had aced every test, or that his name, Jordan Elijah Green, was printed on a certificate already sitting in the school's front office, a certificate for the honor roll ceremony taking place later that very day. Jordan sat quietly in the hallway, his back against the wall just outside room 107. Inside, Miss Cartwright's voice carried through the door, explaining sentence structure and literary tone. Laughter trickled out occasionally. The class had moved on without him, as if he had never been there to begin with. Jordan wasn't new to this. It wasn't the first time a teacher had read his silence as defiance. It wasn't the first time his height or hoodie or quiet presence had made adults suspicious before he even opened his mouth. And it wouldn't be the first time he was punished for being the only one not speaking. He pulled out his notebook, the same one Ms. Cartwright had never looked at. The pages were filled with stories, original ones. Some about time travel, some about kids trying to fix broken families. His grammar was near perfect, his sentences tight. Jordan didn't just write because it was homework. He wrote because it was how he stayed seen when the world preferred to overlook him. As he scribbled in the margins of his latest short story, footsteps echoed down the hallway. It was Ms. Harris, the assistant principal, young, sharp, and one of the few staff members who actually knew students by name. She paused when she saw him. "Jordan?" she asked gently. "Everything okay?" He hesitated. "I got sent out." She frowned. "For what?" He shrugged. "Being early." Ms. Harris sighed, not at him, but at what she already understood without needing the full story. She had seen it before. The quiet kids labeled attitude problems, the polite ones punished for imagined threats. She glanced at the clock. "Come with me," she said. Jordan stood slowly. "Am I in trouble?" "No," she smiled. "Quite the opposite." Jordan followed Ms. Harris down the hallway, his notebook tucked under his arm like a shield. He wasn't sure where they were going, but something in her voice, the calm, the certainty, made him feel less invisible. She led him into the front office. It was quiet and warm, the scent of fresh coffee lingering from the break room. On the counter was a stack of white folders, with gold seals on the front. "Wait here," she said, disappearing behind a side door. Jordan stood still, eyeing the wall of awards and framed photos of smiling students. He didn't expect to see himself up there. Kids like him usually weren't. But then Ms. Harris returned, holding a certificate in her hands. She handed it to him without a word. He read it slowly. Ridgewood Middle School Honor. Roll recipient presented to Jordan Elijah Green for academic excellence in the fall semester. His breath caught. He didn't know this was coming. He hadn't even told his parents that grades had gone well. He didn't want to jinx it. But now, holding proof, something stirred in his chest. Pride and confusion. "Miss, Cartwright didn't mention this?" Ms. Harris asked softly. He shook his head. "She just sent me out." Ms. Harris bit her lip but didn't comment. Instead, she said, "There's an honor roll ceremony today. 1:30 p.m. in the gym. Families will be there." Jordan blinked. "Today?" She nodded. "Your name is on the list. Your seat is reserved." He looked back down at the certificate. For a moment, he didn't know what to do, what to say. "You belong there, Jordan," she added. "Whether they saw you or not." Those words stuck. He nodded slowly, gripping the certificate tighter. The gymnasium had never looked like this before. Streamers in school colors, blue and silver, hung from the rafters. Rows of folding chairs lined the polished floor. A makeshift stage stood at the front with a banner that read, "Academic Excellence Ceremony, Fall Term Honor Roll." Parents were filing in, some in work uniforms, others in business clothes. There were camera flashes, nervous laughter, teachers and staff standing along the walls, reading through printed programs. In the middle row, Jordan Green sat still, his certificate now safely tucked in the inside pocket of his jacket. His mom had rushed over from her shift at the hospital, arriving just in time to squeeze his hand before he was called up. He didn't say much, but she saw the flicker of pride behind his quiet eyes, the way he straightened in his chair when they called out names from the A honor roll. Back in room 107, Ms. Cartwright sat at her desk during planning period, sipping tea and reviewing essays. She glanced at the time, realizing the ceremony had already started. She hadn't been planning to go, but something tugged at her. A name. Jordan Green. She pulled up her gradebook. His name sat near the top, a solid A in every assignment. Polite, on time. His writing was actually good, maybe even the best in the class. She realized with a slow, rising discomfort that she had never read one of his essays all the way through, just skimmed, assumed, filed him under quiet and distant, and never once imagined he was a top student. She stood up slowly, then walked out of her classroom. The gym was nearly full by the time Miss Cartwright slipped inside through the side entrance. She stayed near the back, behind a group of parents standing on tiptoe, trying to catch a glimpse of their kids on stage. She scanned the rows of students in their clean shirts and pressed pants, holding their certificates with pride. Then, she saw him. Jordan. He sat upright, not smiling, but with a calm dignity, the kind that doesn't demand attention but earns it anyway. His mother, seated beside him, had tears in her eyes as she clapped for another child receiving an award. Ms. Cartwright looked down, uncomfortable, because in that moment, it hit her. She hadn't seen him. Not really. She remembered his hoodie, his silence, his seat in the back. She remembered how she had felt annoyed, threatened by his quiet, as if it were defiance instead of thoughtfulness. She'd made no effort to know him, no time to ask. She remembered his face when she told him to leave the room, and now she watched as his name was called over the mic. Next, from 7th grade, a honor roll, Jordan Elijah Green. The crowd applauded. Jordan stood and walked toward the stage with steady steps. He didn't look around nervously. He didn't rush. He just moved like someone who knew he belonged there, even if the world had tried to convince him otherwise. Ms. Cartwright's hands came together in a quiet clap, slow, hesitant, not for the ceremony, but for what she had missed, and what she hoped she could still repair. After the ceremony, the gym slowly emptied out. Parents hugged their kids, cameras flashed, laughter echoed off the high walls. Staff handed out cupcakes and punch, while younger siblings ran between rows of chairs. Jordan stood with his mom near the trophy case. She beamed as she took a photo of him holding his certificate. He gave a small smile, the kind that said, "I'm proud, but I don't want to make a big deal out of it." From across the gym, Miss Cartwright watched. She hesitated. She hadn't planned on staying this long, but she knew she couldn't leave without saying something. She walked over slowly, her heels clicking gently on the gym floor. As she approached, Jordan turned. His posture straightened, just slightly. His mom looked between them, unsure. Miss Cartwright took a breath. "Jordan," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology." He looked up, steady, listening. "I was wrong to send you out of class like that," she continued. "I didn't take the time to see who you really are. And that's on me. You deserve better." Jordan didn't speak at first. He glanced at his mom, who nodded gently, giving him space to respond. Then he said, "Thank you." His voice wasn't bitter. It wasn't triumphant. Just honest. Miss Cartwright smiled faintly. "If you'll let me, I'd like to read more of your writing." "Really read it this time?" Jordan gave a small nod. "I'd like that," he said. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. Miss Cartwright turned to his mother, extended her hand. "You've raised a remarkable young man." His mom smiled, gracious, proud, but firm. "I know." They stood there a moment longer, not as teacher and student, not as authority and subject, but as people seeing each other fully, perhaps for the first time. The next week at school, room 107 felt different. Not because the desks were moved or the lessons were easier, but because something in the air had shifted. A softness, a stillness, a subtle kind of respect that hadn't been there before. Ms. Cartwright began class that Monday with a new routine. She no longer opened with cold attendance or rigid lectures. Instead, she started with something called Voices of the Room, a 5-minute warm-up where one student could share a piece of writing, a quote they liked, or even just a thought from their weekend. She invited volunteers, but on that first day, Jordan raised his hand. He stood at the front of the class, notebook in hand. He didn't make a speech. He didn't stare anyone down. He just opened the pages and began to read one of his short stories, a quiet piece about a boy who built a spaceship out of spare parts to escape a world that never understood him. By the time he finished, the room was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from awkwardness, but the kind that follows being moved. Miss Cartwright looked at him, then at the class. "Jordan," she said softly, "that was beautiful. Thank you." He nodded and walked back to his seat. No grandstanding, no swagger. Just calm, steady pride. Later that day, a printed copy of Jordan's story went up on the student spotlight board outside the classroom. His name was in bold letters. No one asked if he earned it, because now they knew. Jordan's stories would go on to win a regional contest that spring. He'd be invited to a young writers' workshop at a local college, and he'd keep filling his notebook, not for validation, but because he had something to say. And the world had finally learned to listen.